We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. Today is Tuesday. We're getting through the week already. Some interesting stuff going on. We did the live TikTok for the podcast yesterday. That's always kind of fun. A lot of people coming in, asking questions, making comments. I've said it before. I enjoy the fact that we have people participating in the show, whether it be a guest who's on the show, and we don't have a guest today, it's just me, or the emails, which we will have coming up. The Hunter Biden trial is going on in Delaware currently. The defense rested its case. They did the closing arguments, and now the jury is deliberating with regards to Hunter Biden. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that. And I suspect we'll see something today, tomorrow, something like that. I don't know really what to expect. I think the evidence against Hunter Biden is pretty strong, but they always have this other point. Well, you've got to decide what the intent was. And I never understood that when it came to Donald Trump, the Republicans, or even Hunter Biden. The intent. You break a law, you break a law. That's just the way it is. I'll be surprised if Hunter Biden if he's found guilty, I'll be surprised if he does jail time. And if he does, it won't be very long, because this is not the kind of case that would normally have been prosecuted. It's it's the true essence of weaponization of the DOJ. He is going through this trial because he is the president's son. In spite of what Donald Trump says about his trials, which are not weaponized DOJ, this one certainly is. This deal was already cut, and they decided, well, let's go after him anyway. And that was only at the behest of the Republican Party, who pushed this special counsel to do this. So we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll talk about that more later in the show. Of course, we do have some emails. We have a number of emails, actually. First one starts out, "Hi, Mike. I want to encourage folks that we are going to win. Don't let the fact that some rats are jumping on the sinking ship of MAGA convince us the ship isn't going down. The rats like MAGA Sheriff of Riverside County, Chad Bianco, are rallying loudly to Trump with courage because it's a safe bet for them. If he loses, they are none the worse off. There are zero plans for retribution and revenge from the left, too busy being patriotic Americans for that behavior." Well, that's true, but as I've always said, they're going to have that stink of Donald Trump hanging on them. And if nobody else, I'm not going to get violent or anything, but anytime I will talk about somebody who stood solidly with Donald Trump, it could be tomorrow, it could be 20 years from now, if I'm still around, that I will remind folks that this is a devotee of Donald Trump, and he or she will have to live with that for eternity, as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's not going to go well for those people who continue to follow Donald Trump. They should have got off that train a long time ago, but they didn't. The email goes on, "But if convicted felon Trump pulls off a win, the rats will be rewarded with power and be elevated far above their current status. Thank you for your hard work for fighting the good fight. Glad we're on the right side of history. First Sergeant Al Lawrence, U.S. Army, retired." Thank you very much, Al. Thank you for your service. And I'm just going to say he's not going to win. No one can convince me that Donald Trump is going to win. There's just no way for him to do that, in spite of what polls say, and the polls are changing now that he's been convicted. I think he's steadily going to slide from this point on, and his prospects are going to get dimmer and dimmer as time goes on. All right, this next one was a comment on the podcast website on Spotify. "Trump has been convicted of crimes, rape, business dealings. Most other people would not be able to vote or hold office. Why is he able to? He's not above the law." Mark. Well, in terms of running for president, I don't know about other offices, but in terms of running for office, anybody can run for the presidency, if they've been convicted and even if they're in jail. The only reason that is because it doesn't say he can't in the Constitution. That's the only reason. In as far as voting, now, Theoretically, under most circumstances, he would not be able to vote as a convicted felon. But here's the deal: he was convicted in New York. In New York, it says you can't vote if you're in jail, but if you're out of jail, regardless of if you're convicted or not, um, you can vote. But the important thing to remember, New York isn't his home state anymore. It's Florida, and Florida has a deal where if you can vote in the state where you were convicted, you can vote in Florida. So, I'm not even that worried about him voting. It really doesn't amount to much. He's an idiot. His one vote, we know where it's going to go, but it's not going to be enough to do anything. Now, when he's in prison, we got a whole different story. All right, the next one comes from Old Soul. Always love to hear from Old Soul. Hey, Boomer, no doubt by now you've seen the unhinged speech Trump gave at his Vegas rally. Yes, his marbles are rolling around in an empty mind, but it's more to his anger than that. Coming off the heels of his Arizona rally, the Trump's campaign and Secret Service were advised they need to be in compliance before the rally or it would be canceled. They'd have to have free bottles of water on hand for attendees. They'd have to have tents with shade and mist spray. They had to have clearance access for paramedics to be able to make it through the crowd safely and quickly. EMTs had to be on standby within the crowd. I can't remember, but there had to be one EMT for every 300 people or something like that. And EMTs had to be positioned within the crowd. There had to be easy access for people to leave sometimes. People will feel faint, want to go sit down or lay down, but because of the crowd size, they aren't able to. You can't have a mindset that once you're in, you can't get out, not in 110 degrees. Also, they gave him a time limit on the rally. He couldn't just leave his supporters standing out in the heat. Remember, in Arizona, he was 2 hours late, and his supporters were just out there standing in the heat, dropping like flies again. That's not safe. He didn't even apologize to his supporters for leaving them hanging in the heat like that. I don't know if Trump was aware of this, but or not, but his team should have known that in the desert, triple degree heat causes heat stroke. Even children have heat stroke, so it has to be taken seriously. Trump was obviously pissed about the enforced regulations because he got on stage and literally said, quote, everyone was so worried. Everyone was so worried about you, but what about me? Sounds like Donald Trump. They say I only have a limited amount of time, end quote. He said that like he was angry that he couldn't make them stand in the heat for hours on end so he could show up whenever he felt like it. Then he said, quote, if you pass out, it's okay. We have people that will pick you up, throw water on you. Also said, quote, I don't care about you. I just want your vote, end quote. And again, he was trying to be funny there, as he does. Not funny. And that's a serious situation. But the fact of the matter is, he said the quiet part out loud. He does not care about these people. And if they don't know it by now, they should listen to what he says. Old Soul goes on to say, I don't know what's worse, Trump standing on stage whining and complaining because he was forced to keep his supporters safe, or the crowd cheering as he disrespected them in their faces. Obama had plenty of rallies here. He loved having rallies at Cashman Field in the evenings. Most of his events started at around 6 p.m., but even then he had free water, and it was mist and EMTs all over the place. Also, keep in mind, Vegas is the entertainment capital of the world. We have concerts outside all the time. Trump is the first person I've seen pissed off that the people who took the time, energy, and money to come see him has openly complained that he had a responsibility to those people. It's downright disgusting. Anyway, just wanted to let the Boomer Brigade know why he was saying some of the things he said. Thanks for what you do, Old Soul. Thank you, Old Soul. And we'll be talking to her at some point later this week. All right, the next one comes from the Z-Man. Hey, Boomer and Boomer Brigade. It's now known that the Houthi attacks on the Eisenhower and the succeeding images were all faked as well as the attempted smearing of the captain, were faked and has been pushed by pro-Chinese and pro-Russian websites, amongst others. It is an organized disinformation campaign. We talked about the events that might happen to affect the outcome of this election. The Hamas attack in Gaza and now this, amongst other events, should really keep us alert and aware. Be ready to speak up. I would like to hear your thoughts on this, Mike. Z-Man. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are going on, like the attack from Hamas on Israel. I think it took place at an opportune time, not so much for Hamas, certainly not so much for Israel, but it did cause some dissension for some voters with Joe Biden. It may sound like a conspiracy theory to think that they started this whole thing just to affect Joe Biden's chances, but we've seen this before. We've seen this many times before. So Z-Man's right. There could be some other things that occur or some disinformation spewed so in order to make Joe Biden look bad. And trust me, if that should happen more than it already has, we'll be talking about it. We'll do whatever we can to spread that information, because the disinformation is palpable. It's all over the fucking place. They did it in 2016, 2020, and 2024. They keep trying. Last time they lost, and this time they'll lose. All right, the next one says, "Hi, Mike. I was thinking about something you read from another listener's email. I believe her name was Mary. She was speaking about highlighting the many accomplishments of the Biden administration. That is something that Heather Cox Richardson has written extensively about, and I was hoping to relay this information to her. HCR is on Facebook, but she also will send her daily writings via email. I believe if you subscribe to her letters from an American website, you can receive her daily newsletter via email. She can also be found on Facebook and possibly other sites, but those are the only ways I follow her. I'm not on Instagram or anything else. I've listened to your reports about Samuel Alito and the disgrace he continues to bring to the Supreme Court. One thing I come back to over and over is this. My husband works in law enforcement on a federal level. He's not allowed to put up any signs in our yard that endorses any candidate. At least that's what he was taught. I wanted to put up a sign in our yard in support of a local school board candidate, and he told me he wasn't comfortable with that. Guess what? I'm an outspoken woman who has strong beliefs in politics, but guess what else? I honored his job, the integrity of his job, and the integrity of him to conduct himself in his job. He has to remain objective to the law and the rules of our democracy, and I respect that. So we fly an American flag right side up, period. I respect the fact that he has to be impartial in every sense of the word. Thanks always for all you do, Gabrielle. Yeah, that would be the common reaction from a wife or a husband whose spouse is in a position where they have to keep some subjectiveness, and the excuses that Samuel Alito comes up with are pretty fucking ridiculous. Pretty fucking ridiculous. Now, I don't know if you heard, and we'll probably talk about this later too, but there were some recordings that came out. There's this woman who is a liberal, but sometimes poses as a radical right, religious right person, and will ask questions and kind of encourage famous politicians, or in this case, a Supreme Court justice, to speak their mind. And she did that. She was talking about the polarization between the two parties and how it's unlikely they could ever come together. And Samuel Alito said, yeah, somebody's got to win this. There is no way to split the difference. And that was a way that Alito showed that he is not impartial, which is one of the building blocks of him being in his job. He has his beliefs, and they do color the way he makes his decisions in the Supreme Court. Samuel Alito has a lot of problems, and I think his time is going to come. It may not come till after the election, but it's going to come, and he will either be encouraged to leave or he will be forced to leave. And I think the same with Clarence Thomas. I think when we start to get those superseding indictments from Jack Smith regarding the insurrection, I think Jenny Thomas and Clarence Thomas are going to take a fucking serious hit. All right. Thank you, Gabrielle. I appreciate it. Next email. Hi, Boomer. Feeling comfortable here on your couch today because here you come to save the day. Well, I try. The above behavior of J.P. Miller is so Trump-esque. This bad behavior is expected, endorsed, and now condoned as normal by MAGA fucks. Making crime pay is the status quo in America today because of Trump. Because of Trump, it will only worsen. Look what they have reduced this country to, and now everybody's doing it. Trump laid the plan. J.P. Miller learned from the master criminal. The following I posted on one of your TikToks, just some food for thought. I did some digging around just a little bit. I found some interesting information. Aileen Cannon and Juan Marchand were both born in Bogota, Colombia. Should we read anything into that? I'll reserve my opinion until after the sentencing. Aileen Cannon's husband used to work for Trump's mob boss friend before becoming a restaurateur. I think he probably still does. This could come to prove that she is taking her cues from the mob, and they may even be influencing the 11th Circuit. How convenient. Call it a conspiracy theory if you like. However, that's the research that I came up with when digging around. Dems have a habit of not reading too much into anything, and worse habit of not seeing into it at all. I'm just saying or asking. Yeah, I think there's enough there to raise a red flag, to question anyway, to look into, to investigate. But clearly they haven't done that. I think if she continues down the road she is and doesn't ultimately recuse herself, whatever she does with Donald Trump's criminal trial, she's going to pay a price later on. If nothing else, she's going to be exposed for who she is. She's not going to be a popular judge if she helps Donald Trump delay this particular case. She's already getting thousands of complaints every day. This can't look good, and it's going to cause her some problems. She goes on to say, Merrick Garland did such a good job with Timothy McVeigh that I find it hard to believe he missed the mark so badly on the Trump MAGA terrorist activity. So has Jack Smith. Something's rotten in America, much deeper than what we know. Thanks again, Boomer, for putting up with me, us, Mary, Biden, or bust. Well, there's a couple of differences between Timothy McVeigh and Donald Trump. First of all, I think the Timothy McVeigh thing happened in the 90s. We were in an entirely different world, an entirely different political scheme. And secondly, Timothy McVeigh was not the former president of the United States. We've got people like Merrick Garland that are afraid to look too political. We wish Aileen Cannon had that same concern, but Merrick Garland is too tentative. All of this should have been done and over by now had Merrick Garland done his job. I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand all the aspects of the DOJ, but I know if somebody's breaking the law and you support the rule of law, you go after them as soon as you can. And Merrick Garland specifically didn't go after Donald Trump because he was afraid of the backlash and he was afraid of the political appearance. Now, something I've said all along, and I think Merrick Garland is going to realize this very soon. Merrick Garland was thinking about history. He was thinking about Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford and how, well, if we don't indict him, it'll be better for the country. The country can heal. But what he hasn't accounted for is that there are more people that are looking for Donald Trump to be held accountable than they are than just trying to let him off and heal. He's going to cause more of a political outrage if Donald Trump isn't held accountable. I've said this before. You know, when Alvin Bragg took over in the Manhattan district for Cyrus Vance, he decided up front not to continue to prosecute Donald Trump initially. A lot of people thought badly of Alvin Bragg, including me. I thought, why are you being such a pussy about this? But when it came down to it, who was the first person to indict Donald Trump? Alvin Bragg. Who was the first person to convict Donald Trump? It was, again, Alvin Bragg. Why is a New York State DA leading the charge against a criminal, the proportion of Donald Trump? He has got to be one of the most prolific criminals we've seen in a long time, if not in history. And you have to wonder why we get people in the DOJ like Merrick Garland afraid to support and endorse and enforce rule of law. I've said before, I think Merrick Garland, after the election, he has to go. There are some better candidates that are more assertive and understand the job and aren't such pussy ass bitches like Merrick Garland. I'm sure he's a fine man. I'm sure he's an honest man. I'm sure he's a good jurist, but he should go back to being a federal judge or whatever. He has no business being an attorney general. He just doesn't. He's proved that to us, and we need to get somebody better in there to do the job. Because I'm going to tell you this: once the election over, the DOJ is going to be working harder. We're going to have sitting members of Congress. We're going to have 3 trials, well, at least 1 trial that's federal for Donald Trump. Whoever's going to be in that position is going to have to get their hands dirty and do some shit. So if Merrick Garland doesn't have the stomach for it, doesn't have the courage or the balls for it, we need to get somebody who does. Jamie Raskin would be a great choice. Amy Klobuchar would be a great choice. There's any number of great choices to be Attorney General, just not Merrick Garland at this point. He's had his shot. He failed miserably. And I'm tired of his shit. I mean, frankly, we wouldn't have what's going on in Washington and Florida without Jack Smith. That's the only smart thing he did. He hired Jack Smith. And that's well and good, but he waited too long. He waited 2 years to do that. That's bullshit. All right. The next email says, "Hi, Mike. I was listening to Ed on your podcast tonight, and his story of the history in America during when his mom was part of the war effort, like many other women, brought me to tears. He spoke so eloquently about how it is truthfully in this country, how women are used and how Republicans want to turn back the clock. We're not going to let that happen. As Democrats, we're not going to see women's rights taken away with impunity. Ignorance and hate are not going to be your prevailing sentiments. We have to be better collectively, and it's not going to get better until we get rid of Trump and all of his sycophantic followers in government. And it is our destiny to overcome this time that we're facing now and will prevail." I was trying to look for Ed on TikTok. What is his name on TikTok? Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Boomer. Always a great episode, Rhonda. Ed is on TikTok and he's on YouTube, and you can find him at Holler Troll, HOLLERTROLL, at Holler Troll, HOLLERTROL. And Ed's a very talented guy, not only about politics, but in storytelling and history and that sort of thing. So I would, by all means, check him out. I don't know that you'll find as heavy a pop political thing when you do find him, but he's worth the listen. He's definitely worth the listen. So check him out. All right. This one's from Brad. It came as a comment on the podcast page. She says, "Abe is my kind of guy. Been following him for years. Excellent podcast, Mike." And I'd have to agree. Abe is another one of those folks that's entertaining as well as informative. He has a great perspective of what's going on. And I love having Ed on, or Ed. I love having Ed, but I love having Abe on the show as well. Thank you, Bren, for that. The next one says, "You may already know about Trump's probation meeting. Virtually is just pre-sentencing, so drug testing is not required yet. I learned that from Katie Fong. Katie Fang. Sorry, I missed the TikTok live on YT. Text me next time. LOL. Thanks, Steve in Canada. Yeah, Donald Trump had his pre-sentencing hearing with the probation department. A lot of people have been talking about some of the tests he's going to have to take. He's going to have to take a mental acuity test and a drug test and some other things. And a lot of people said, well, this is going to be by Zoom. So how is he going to take that test? Well, those tests are for prior to sentencing, not prior to the probation hearing. So sometime between now and July 11th, he will have to take those tests. And I'm going to be interested to see if they publish the results of those tests. Probably not going to go well for Donald Trump. Now, in the hearing yesterday, they won't publish how that went. But I have a feeling that might have been a problem because Donald Trump was required yesterday to do something that he's not good at. First, answering questions. Second, answering questions truthfully. Yeah, that's not going to go very well. He had his lawyer with him in order to keep him in check. But the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump had to answer the questions. And if the wrong question is asked, Donnie Trump could lose his shit. I understand the hearing took only about half hour, and that's pretty typical. So I don't know how much trouble he could have gotten into in a half hour, but I have a lot of confidence in Donald Trump. When Donald Trump is talking, he fucks up every time. All right, the next one says, hey, Mike, I have a theory I want to float by you to see if it holds any water. We all know the incredibly corrupt SCOTUS is delaying the presidential immunity claim and will, at the very last minute, push it back to the appellate court it came from for further examination. I guess my question is, does the lower court then have to deny it again and then send it back to SCOTUS? Because if so, my theory is that they're going to delay this past the election in hopes of a Trump victory and then overturn the decision, giving the sociopathic fuckwad complete autocracy. We both know Dirty Diaper Donnie isn't winning, but is this theory at all possible? And please don't tell me they'd only be hurting themselves, because we both know that the orange turd will give cushy little jobs to all his complicit little sheep. Take care, Philly Paul. I think that is possible. And I think that's maybe what they're considering. I don't know this for sure. People seem convinced that they're going to send it back to the appellate court, and that could very possibly be. Now, the appellate court could make a decision, and then I guess theoretically they could send it back to the Supreme Court. They're going to be on vacation throughout the summer, so it will definitely push it beyond the election. But the other thing that Judge Chutkan could do, and I heard somebody talking about this, one of the legal experts, Judge Chutkan could say, okay, well, if we're going to send it back to me, and if you can't make the decision, we're going to go through this motherfucker. So Donald Trump and your lawyers, bring all your evidence. Prosecution, bring all your evidence. We're going to go through it fucking all. You want a delay? We'll make a delay. We'll take all the evidence. We'll expose all the evidence before you even go on trial, and see how they like that. I have a feeling that's not going to be something they're going to want to do. And as far as it being delayed after the election, I mean, we're getting pretty close here. I'm thinking it may be delayed after the election. And I know you don't want to hear it, but the fact that he's got 34 felony charges right now, that's enough to do him in. And if it comes before the election, great. That would be devastating to Donald Trump, because he will most certainly be convicted. If it comes after the election, not worried about it, because then Donald Trump is very vulnerable. As I've said before, he has no protection. He's not a presidential candidate. He's not the president. The Republican Party will pretty much abandon him if he gets beat like the way I expect he'll get beat. They'll finally step away from him because he's really of no value to them. He can't get votes, he can't make money, and he's a convict. Now, they should have been able to see this before now, but we know the Republicans aren't the brightest crowd. So they're going to ride this horse through the election. They're going to get their ass kicked, and then they're going to be done with Donald Trump. They have to be done with Donald Trump and MAGA in general. It's a losing cause for them. To stick with it would be absolutely ignorant. Now we know that's distinctly possible. And let's hope they do, because MAGA and Donald Trump, their power is getting weaker every day. The Republicans know it. They know they don't have a chance for the presidential election. They're only hoping against hope that Donald Trump is the nominee, so the Trump-lefucks do show up, and they have some hope, not much, but some hope in the down ballot candidates. So we'll see what happens. And as far as what you're laying out there, Philly Paul, that's possible, I guess. I don't know for sure, but I will check into it and find out. But that wouldn't surprise me that that would be their strategy if delay is what they're going for. All right. We will take a quick break, and we will be right back. So, Dirty Diaper Donnie Trump spent less than 30 minutes answering routine questions in his virtual pre-sentencing interview. That's right. He did it via Zoom, much like I do the shows with our guests. And it was just a short, and again, they're routine questions, but they're hard questions for a guy who's a compulsive liar. So it'll be interesting to see if we see any kind of report as to how that hearing went. Apparently, it didn't go off the rails. Otherwise, it would have probably lasted longer. They probably told Donald Trump, don't talk so fucking much, just answer the questions. And that would have been hard for him. But less than a half hour, couldn't have gone too crazy. Now, the court mandates questions and answer session. It lasted less than a half hour of routine and uneventful questions and answers. The Associated Press citing an anonymous source. So whoever was there and saw this, probably somebody from Donald Trump's side, said that it was no big deal. And that's possible. The results of the interview are expected to help form a report arranged by a New York City probation officer. It'll then be used to inform Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan's decision when he is expected to sentence Trump on all 34 counts of falsifying business records on July 11th. It is June 11th. So we're talking about a month away. And it's just 4 days before the 3-day Republican National Convention is set to begin. That's going to put a little damper on Donnie's little party in the National Convention, not to mention all the other problems they have, like not having any money, not having a sponsor. This is going to be a low-budget National Convention, I have a feeling. Now, the report may be sweeping in its detail of Trump's conviction, his social, family, and employment background, as well as his education and economic status. It would remain confidential unless the judge authorizes its release, which I'm guessing he probably won't do. Now, Trump remains the presumptive Republican nominee to go against Donald Trump. Besides granting Trump the unusual luxury of conducting the interview remotely through Zoom, the former president was next to his attorney, Todd Blanche, which they don't normally do. There isn't usually a lawyer in the room for this particular situation. And no doubt Todd Blanche was there to keep Donald Trump under control, if that's even possible. Now, former New York City Department of Corrections and Probation Commissioner Martin Horn called the format highly unusual. In an interview with the Daily Beast, Horn described pre-sentencing meetings such as the one Trump completed areas more often held in person, and which give the probation officer autonomy to ask probing questions about a convict's life. Complicating his case has been the fury of Trump has unleashed on the judge, who could decide whether he goes to prison or manages to be spared of it. Make no mistake, I think there's some people out there that think that he is going to get away with it and do nothing. He'll be convicted, but there'll be no punishment. That's not the case. There's an excellent chance that he'll serve some time in prison. If not, there's probation, there's home lockdown, there's all kinds of things, but something's going to happen to him. And even if it's something as simple as probation, here's what you have to understand. When you're a convict and you've been sentenced, even to probation, there are some rules that you have to follow. You can't just pop out of the state in your private jet to do whatever you want. You need permission to do that. And Donald Trump's not going to be happy about that. The other thing to consider, too, is when he finally goes to trial in some of these other cases, because he's a convicted felon, I don't know that they can give him a stay on his sentence in those other cases while he's on appeal. Because he's a convicted felon, he will have to start serving his penalty when it's sent down. Now, at one point, not in this meeting, but of course, Donald Trump called Juan Marchand the devil, which is probably not a good thing to do for a guy who holds your fate in his hands. There's never been a more conflicted judge, Trump said of Marchand, complaining about the thousands of dollars he was told to pay in fines for flouting his gag order 10 times. What he also needs to remember is he violated that gag order after he was punished for those crimes. And the judge has reserved decision on that to a later date. And that later date is no doubt going to come into play when he is sentenced on June 11th. I don't know if it'll be something in addition or as part of his sentence. I don't know how that's going to work out, but it will come into play and it will be considered by the judge when he's doing the sentencing. That in addition to not being remorseful and calling the judge and his daughter names, attacking witnesses, and all of the prosecution, and he's still doing it today. That's the problem. He's just absolutely indignant about this, and this will have to come into play when he's sentenced. All right. Now, MSNBC on Monday aired never-before-seen footage of an irate Senator Chuck Schumer demanding to know why the National Guard had not yet been deployed to secure the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, after the Trumplafucks attacked the Capitol. And this is interesting. And the reason why it's interesting is because, of course, the Trumplafucks will say it was all Nancy Pelosi's fault. She held back the National Guard, but the funny thing about it is that she was sitting next to Chuck Schumer in hiding, trying to save themselves from these mouth breathers, and they were wondering why the National Guard has not been sent. Chuck Schumer even said he called the person at the Pentagon, and they refused to send out the National Guard. That's not something Nancy Pelosi had power over. Fact is, Nancy Pelosi called Larry Hogan in Maryland to try to get some help from another state with the National Guard. Now, anchor Katie Tour introduced the new video saying, new never-before-seen footage just first obtained by MSNBC from congressional sources shows the anger and chaos among congressional leaders on January 6th as they try to make sense of what's unfolding at the Capitol. At the center of it all, their request for help from the National Guard. And then Katie Fang goes on and says, here you can see Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is at Fort McNair. And the clip that we're about to show you, the military base that they were evacuated to that became their command center, grilling then Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy on why the National Guard wasn't already deployed. And that's a good question. There could only be one answer. Somebody had to be holding them back. And who had the power to do that? I think that's Donald Trump. Now, as I said, Trump has long spread the roundly debunked falsehood that then Speaker Nancy Pelosi blocked his order to send the National Guard to the Capitol ahead of January 6th. Trump's own acting defense secretary told Congress under oath that Trump never gave any such order. So once again, Donald Trump is lying. Furthermore, the president is the commander-in-chief of the District of Columbia's National Guard, and a congressional leader could not prevent it from being deployed, which is why Schumer and Pelosi had to plead with Trump officials to get it activated on January 6th. Now, the National Guard did come out well after it was all over, and that's exactly the way Donald Trump wanted it to be. Now, Schumer can be heard saying D.C. has requested the National Guard and it has been denied by the DOD, the Department of Defense. I'd like to know a good fucking reason why it's been denied. We need them fast. We've all had to. I've never seen anything like this. We're like a third world country here. We had to run and evacuate the Capitol. He goes on to say, all right, I spoke to the Secretary of the Army and he's given the full okay to give the National Guard. He said it was not done. I'm going to call up the Secretary of Defense, Schumer adds in the clip, as the others speak as well. Now, Katie Fang says, joining me now is Colorado Congressman Jason Crow. He's a veteran, and he was ready to fight. He didn't have a weapon, of course, but he was ready to fight if needed to. He was in the House gallery on January 6th, so seeing this footage and seeing the urgency, hearing the urgency from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and trying to get the National Guard there, wondering why in the world the National Guard wasn't already there. It's not like they were far away. They weren't that far away. What does that tell you about those moments? Tor then asked. He said, Katie, it's just a stark reminder for everybody about the chaos, the brutality, the violence of the day. You know, we can't forget what happened, and we can't forget the fragility sometimes of our system. You know, we were very close to having a full-blown overturning of the election. This was an insurrection. There is no other way to classify it, that mob of insurrectionists trying to overturn a legitimate, lawful election. They did so at the request of Donald Trump, and we cannot forget that. I know there's a lot of other things competing for people's attention right now. People are raising families, building businesses, doing really important stuff across the entire country. But again, let's not forget that there are moments where our democracy is at risk. And we are in one of those moments still, he said. Tur continued, I've got a couple of more sound bites that I think are worth playing. And this one is Schumer with Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen. And this is an interesting part of that video. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, you should look at it. Schumer says, why don't you get the president to tell them to leave the Capitol? Mr. Attorney General, in your law enforcement responsibility, a public statement, they should all leave. He is saying in his tweet that we are for peace, law and order. Yeah, well, why don't you get him to make that statement? Would you do that? Schumer demands. Rosen replied as Schumer hits back, will you ask the president to make a statement, to ask them to leave the Capitol, okay? Now, Rosen says, so as you might guess, we are coordinating this quickly. As Schumer demands, no, please answer my question. Answer my question. And he says, Senator, I'm going to do everything I can do, Rosen replied. Does that include asking the president to get the people who are his followers to leave the Capitol? Schumer hit back. Well, we all know how long it took for the president to tell them to leave. Let me play one more before I ask you a question. This is Nancy Pelosi speaking to Vice President Pence. And we are disappointed that the fact that it took so long to approve the National Guard, but I'm glad to hear that that's at least moving, Pelosi could be heard saying to Pence. So all this bullshit that Donald Trump had continued to spew about how it was all Nancy Pelosi's fault. This is classic Donald Trump. He fucks up. He did it intentionally. He was hoping against hope that these red meat eating, mouth breathing dumb fucks were able to stop the certification. That was his goal. That was his intention. And he did not want to stop what they were doing. That's why he held back the National Guard, not Nancy Pelosi. As they said, Donald Trump is the commander in chief. He commands the National Guard. If he wanted the National Guard there, nobody could have stopped him. The only person that could stop the National Guard from going is the president. And he was the president at that time. So his complaints and his arguments and his information is all absolutely bullshit. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about the Supreme Court, specifically Samuel Alito. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who I like a lot, he's a smart man. He's an old white man, but he's a good one. Sheldon Whitehouse demanded answers from the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito Monday about an improper interview he gave to the Wall Street Journal about regulation of the highest court in the land. Now, the conservative justice in July sat down with the paper and argued no provision in the Constitution gives Congress the authority to regulate the Supreme Court, period. The comments were made after ProPublica published claims that Justice Clarence Thomas accepted gifts from a billionaire, but just before it reported a GOP donor paid for a luxury fishing trip to Alaska for Alito. Whitehouse, who co-chairs the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Federal Courts, sent a letter to Alito seeking information about his comments, saying his interview raised several problems. He said, "It thus appears that you offered an improper opinion regarding a question that might come before the court. Did so in a context of knowing ongoing legal dispute involving the precise question. Did so at behest of an interviewer who was a lawyer represented a client in that ongoing dispute, and did so to the benefit of his client, your personal friend, and to the benefit of yourself as a recipient of undisclosed gifts that were subject to our investigation," Whitehouse wrote. Whitehouse knows his shit. And if anybody's going to press Judge Alito, it's going to be Sheldon Whitehouse. Now, Whitehouse filed an ethics complaint against Alito in response to the same interview, which was published July 28th, but he said Chief Justice John Robert never responded. The senator submitted a follow-up complaint after the attorneys for a benefactor who gave undisclosed gifts to justices cited his remark to the Journal as justification to refuse to cooperate with the Senate Judiciary Committee investigation. Now, he went on to say, Congress has an appropriate and well-established role in oversight of the judiciary and updating ethics law that apply to federal officials, including justices and judges, White House office wrote. Now, Congress passed the Ethics in Government Act and judicial recusal law, which expressly applies to the justices. Congress also created through statute that the Judicial Conference, which administers financial disclosure laws for the entire judiciary. So the idea that Alito can say that Congress holds no sway over the Supreme Court is absolute bullshit. He should know that. He does know that. And the fact that he stated that was an out-and-out lie. Well, here's an interesting story. It's about the Florida case, the classified documents case, and Judge Aileen Cannon. Seems Judge Aileen Cannon did a favor for Jack Smith. Well, let's talk about the story. A federal judge, Aileen Cannon, handed former President Donald Trump a loss Monday by rejecting his motion to dismiss a number of charges in the Mar-a-Lago secret documents case. But the right-wing jurist found a way to slip a small piece of help to Trump in the decision. Cannon herself, a Trump appointee, has reportedly come under fire for skewing the trial toward Trump, including postponing the trial well past the date of November's election with the justification there were too many pretrial disputes to sort through after she herself sat on those disputes for months. There were a lot of disputes, but she refused to do anything about them, and she was part of the reason, if not all of the reason, for the delay. We can expect that Donald Trump is going to come up with all kinds of motions, but any good judge would know how to handle it. Seems Juan Merchan, who ran into the same kind of issues, had no trouble figuring that out. Now, in a new opinion tonight, Judge Aileen Cannon, or last night, Cannon denies a motion to dismiss the Mar-a-Lago docks case due to alleged pleading deficiencies in the obstruction and false statement charges of the indictment. But there's a sweetener for Trump and his campaign. Lisa Rubin wrote, and that sweetener was her decision to strike paragraph 36 of the indictment, which concerns Trump's alleged showing while at Bedminster, a classified map of a country with an ongoing military operation not going well to a PAC representative, reported Rubin. The reason Cannon gave, Rubin continued, is that there were prosecutors who want to introduce evidence of prior crimes or wrongs. They have to provide a pretrial notice for that reason, justifying use of such evidence for a purpose other than showing the defendant's propensity to act a given way, and motion practice ensues. Now, here's the thing. When Donald Trump was first indicted in this classified documents case, at first they thought that they were going to try him in D.C., which would have been an entirely different situation. But Jack Smith was trying to be careful. And since the documents were in Florida, he thought it would be less hassle and less trouble by prosecuting in Florida. He could have done either. He chose Florida, and in retrospect, he fucked up. He was trying to do the right thing. And of course, when we get somebody like Aileen Cannon, that changes everything. Now, Rubin went on to say, even assuming that would be a typical decision, Cannon never explains how the two preceding paragraphs, which also implicates Trump in showing classified information to Mark Meadows, ghostwriter, and a publisher at Bedminster, are any different. Can anyone make this make sense and explain why the indictment had to be modified, but only as to the one in the Bedminster episodes? And here's my thought. Okay, if they want to play that fucking game, if they had to take it to Florida instead of D.C. because the documents were in D.C., why then couldn't Jack Smith indict Donald Trump again for crimes in New Jersey? And maybe that's what's coming. Who really knows for sure? But Aileen Cannon has done everything she can to make this a mess. And now that we've got the Manhattan District case over, hopefully we can focus some more attention, the country's attention, and apply more pressure on somebody like Aileen Cannon and ultimately the 11th Circuit. Now, this comes as Cannon is also set to preside over a lengthy argument complete with extensive testimonies from outside constitutional experts about whether special counsel Jack Smith was improperly appointed to prosecute the case against Trump. And of course, he wasn't. This is something that's been adjudicated many, many times, but it's just another stumbling block that Donald Trump's people put up there. I mean, that's what they do. That's how they do business. It's all about the delay. And frankly, I don't think the delay is working in their benefit now anymore. He's already got 34 felony charges. No matter what Aileen Cannon wants to do, she can't change that. Donald Trump will be sentenced on July 11th. His prospects are decidedly different now that he's already a convicted felon. Aileen Cannon can do whatever she wants to do to try to save him, but it's just not going to fucking work. He's already cooked. Now, we were talking about Hunter Biden. Donald Trump talks about how the DOJ is weaponized against him, which is the furthest from the truth. I mean, the evidence is there. The witnesses are there. He was prosecuted. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers. It can't go any more by the book than that one did. Now, with Hunter Biden, it's a much different situation. Hunter Biden is on trial right now for gun charges. And the gun charges are basically that he purchased a gun while addicted to drugs, which is illegal, and that he signed a federal paper saying he was not addicted to drugs. Okay. Now, they weren't even going to try this case because it's kind of a piddly, pissant kind of case. There were other charges like the tax charges, which he will face later on. But they pushed it anyway. The Republicans did. They pushed the special counsel to prosecute as opposed to the deal they cut. That is the weaponization of the DOJ, the weaponization of the special counsel. That's a fact. Now, that jury is in deliberations as of yesterday. And the verdict could come today, tomorrow, could come probably at some point this week. And we'll see what happens. I don't know enough about this case or the law to really decide what's going to happen. Will he do jail time? Will he go on probation? Who knows? And as I've said before, I don't really think much about Hunter Biden because he's not the president. He's not looking to be president, and he's not in the government. If he's a guy that fucked up and he broke a law, well, then he should have to pay the price. Hunter Biden is 54. He's the son of Joe Biden. He's accused of lying about his illegal drug use when he bought a handgun in 2018, and that, of course, is a felony. Now, there's one aspect of this that comes into play that I never really understood. I think I brought it up earlier. Not only do they have to prove that he did this, and it sounds like they have some evidence to show he did, but they have to show his intent. I always love that. They talk about that with Donald Trump, his intent. Did he really understand what he was doing? And I never understood that whole aspect of it because, I mean, if you're in a fight someplace and you punch somebody in the face and they die, your intention may not have been to kill this guy, but you're still going to pay a price, right? I mean, the law is the law. If you break the law, you should be held accountable. Now, the 12-member jury began deliberations after prosecutors and Hunter Biden's defense team presented their closing arguments. The jury met for about an hour before concluding the deliberations for the day, and they're back today at 9 a.m. It's either upcoming or it's already in the process. And as I say, they're likely to come out with a verdict fairly soon. Now, Hunter Biden did not take the stand during the one-week trial, and it was being held in Biden's hometown of Wilmington, Delaware. First Lady Jill Biden was there several days of the trial, including Monday's court session yesterday. The president did not attend, but said he and Jill are proud of their son. Now, he's been sober for some time now. He's not currently doing drugs. He's rehabilitated himself, and he's doing fine now. And that has to be considered. I mean, if he is found guilty and they have to have a pre-sentencing probation hearing, those things have to come into play. As much as Donald Trump has things working against him, well, Hunter Biden has some things working for him. Joe Biden said, as president, I don't and won't comment on pending federal cases, but as a dad, I have boundless love for my son, confidence in him, and respect for his strength. That's what Biden said in a statement. And I'm just trying to remember, what did Melania say about Donald Trump? Oh, yeah, they said nothing. Melania didn't even show up. Neither did Barron. He had other clowns show up, but his closest part of his family decided not to show. I mean, Eric and Don Jr. showed up, but they're goofballs anyway. Who fucking cares? Now, there is another case in which Hunter Biden faces tax evasion charges in California, and they have complicated Democrats' effort to keep the focus on Trump, the first former president ever to be convicted of a crime. And that's the intention. That's why they're going after Hunter Biden, not because his crimes are that egregious or that anybody else would be prosecuted for it. They're trying to spin it off of Donald Trump. let's be honest. Donald Trump was convicted of 34 felony charges. That's going to be hard to fucking spin. They're just not going to be able to spin that. Now, if found guilty, Hunter Biden could face 25 years in prison, although as a first-time offender, jail time is unlikely, much like what we've talked about Donald Trump. The only difference between Donald Trump and Hunter Biden, he doesn't have 34 fucking charges like Donald Trump. He's not going to go to jail for 25 years. He'll not likely go to jail. He'll get probation or something if found guilty. Now, of course, Hunter Biden's been a target of the Republicans, and Trump allies have investigated him at length in Congress on allegations of corruption and influence peddling. And I don't even know if those are legit or not. They could be. I mean, you get a guy who's a drug addict, they will do a lot of things, a lot of fucked up things. And he was legitimately a drug addict. So he may have fucked up. He may have committed crimes. And as I've said, if he did, well, then he should be punished. Now, Donald Trump gave a pre-recorded address at an event hosted by the Danbury Institute, which calls abortions the greatest atrocity facing our generation and a child sacrifice. The group advocates a total ban on the procedure with no exceptions. Now, this is interesting because Donald Trump kind of tap dance around this topic. As much as he claims responsibility for overturning Roe v. Wade, he's as much as said, well, I'm not all for a national ban. But now he's talking to this group, and if he says that, he's going to get booed out the motherfucking place. Now, in his address played at the Institute's Life and Liberty Forum on Monday, Trump pledged to stand with the organization. These are difficult times for our nation, and our work is so important, he said. We can't afford to have anyone sit on the sidelines. Now is the time for us all to pull together and to stand up for our values and for our freedoms. And you just can't vote Democrat. They're against religion. They're against your religion in particular. You cannot vote Democrat. Former president called the U.S. a seriously declining nation. Don't know where he gets that from. Stock market's doing well. Manufacturers doing well. Everything's doing well. But Donald Trump will spew a lie, and he'll say it over and over again in hopes that some dumb fuck believes it. He went on to say, I know what's happening. I know where you're coming from and where you're going, and I'll be with you side by side. Trump appointed the 3 judges to overturn Roe v. Wade, of course. But if he's standing side by side with this organization, that would suggest that he is standing by a national abortion ban, which, as I've told you before, means that that's going to kill his chances of winning the presidency. No way in the world you can embrace overturning Roe v. Wade, where 75% of the country supports it, and expect to win an election. I have to believe the Republicans understand that and know that too. I think Donald Trump is going to be a sacrificial lamb. He will go up there, he will get his ass kicked, and they're only hoping against hope that the down ballot does better for them. And frankly, I don't think it will. Republicans in general, we talk about MAGA and we talk about Donald Trump, but for me, it's the entire Republican Party. They stood by Donald Trump. They stood by MAGA. Even if they say they're not MAGA, they stood by and they allowed this shit to happen. So they all must pay the price for this bullshit. They all must go. They must be eradicated. As I've said before, if we leave even one standing in Congress, they have the potential of metastasizing and growing back. It may take some time, but we have to clean house when it comes to Republicans, whether they consider themselves MAGA or not. We got to fucking clean house. We've got to set everything straight. And once we do that, after the January 20th inauguration, it's going to take us a while to get things straightened out. It's not going to happen immediately. The Republicans did a fine job of fucking up this country. and it's not going to be turned around in an instant. We have to put in the work and do what we have to do, but we have to be allowed to do that. And the only way we're going to be allowed to do that is if we don't have Republicans trying to obstruct everything we fucking do. So we keep our fingers crossed, get out and vote, and things will be okay, but it's going to take some time to get there. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again soon.